Alright guys, welcome back, and in this video we will be taking a look at variables, and we will be learning about variables and how they work in C++. So to do that, let's create a new project. Here it is a console application as usual. We go to next, Here we create variables. We name this project variables and we finish this off. Let's see, we have our hello world default program that we can build and run. And we get hello world written on the screen. Let's end that. Let's zoom in a bit and let's start learning about variables. So you remember that in JavaScript, you had this notion of a variable where you could store numbers, you could store strings and so on and so forth. And the only thing you need to do in JavaScript was to write var and then test like this. And then you can save test equals to 5. And then you had your variable. Now, I mean, as you can see, this will not work in C++ because var doesn't exist in C++. Instead, what you have is that you have different types. So this is quite important. I mean, here variables have types. And whenever you declare a variable, you need to tell C++ what type it is. And so the first type that we will be learning is called int or integer. So these are numbers. So for example, if we want to create a variable that holds numbers, we type int to create the variable. And we specify the type of the variable in this way by writing int, and then we write the name of the variable, and then we write the value. So now if I build and run this, you see it runs. And now, for example, what I can do is that I can write hello world, and then I can write like this, and test, and like this. And also, you remember, this is something we haven't covered, but endl basically means end line, and this gives you this new line at the end of the expression of the text. It basically skips a line, but don't worry about that. I mean, if you want, you can remove it. But now, if I build and run this, let's see. You see that I have hello world 5. So we are successfully printing a variable from our program to the console. And here I can have, for example, let's create a variable called a equals 5, another variable called b equals to 3, and the third variable called c, which is 5 plus 3. And now I can, for example, print c, and if I now build and run, you see I have 8 written in the console. So just like in JavaScript, what you can do is that you can do different expressions here. For example, actually what we should have here is a times b and minus 8, for example. So let's see what happens. So you have a times b, so 5 times 3 minus a is 10. So 15 minus 5, like this. So these are expressions. Now, and much like in JavaScript, you remember that you had Boolean variable, and this is the second type, Boolean. And Boolean, they hold either true or false, and you're able to combine them into different expressions. So for example, bool, let's say bool d equals to true, bool e equals to false. So for example, what we can do is that we can do as we did in JavaScript, that you can create bool k and another variable that is d and e. So k should be false. Let's see what we get as output when we try to output k right here. Let's go build and run. And you see we get 0. Now, this is quite special to C++ compared to JavaScript, but true is equal to 1 and false is equal to 0. So when you output a boolean, you actually get a 0 or a 1. But just keep in mind that in C++ it is the case that if you get a 0, it means false. If you get a 1, it means true. So for example, if we change this to OR, and guys, I hope you are familiar with this already because we've done this in JavaScript before. We're just learning another syntax. We're just learning another way of expressing ourselves in another programming language. So let's go to build and run. And you can see now we have 1 because D or E equals to true, because D is true, E is false, and the OR operator here will just care about the fact that only one of the elements that are in this expression, only one of them needs to be true for the whole expression to be true. So these are booleans. Next up, what we also will learn is the third type, and this is double and float. And something to realize is, for example, if we want to have a variable called h, and we want to store 0.5. We want to store a decimal number. And if we try to print that to the screen, let's see what happens. You see we get 0. Why is it so? Well, because integers are not able to store decimals. They are only able to store whole numbers. So this is something to realize, that integer is only whole number. And if you give an integer something that is a decimal number, it will just take the whole number. So for example, if we do 0.9, C++ will skip the 9 and only use 0. Now, if you've gone to school and you've gone to math classes, you probably know that if you have 0.9, you usually round it up to 1. So if you do normal algebra, you might round it up to 1. But something to realize is that in C++, integers do not care about the decimal. They just cut this off like this, and therefore, as we now see, 0.9 is actually 0, because they only look at the whole numbers, and the whole number in this particular expression is 0, and then you have 9/10. So this is kind of how you think about numbers. But what you can do instead is that you can write double. So if we write double and we build and run, well, you see now we actually have 0.9. So by using a double, you're actually able to store decimal numbers. And also, for the same purpose, you could use a float like this. So float equals 0.9, and you see you also get 0.9 here. This is something to realize, guys, that double and float are basically used for the same thing. There are some small differences between double and float, but we will not learn about them today. We will just learn that if you want to use a decimal number, use double. Do not use float. Always use a double. But if you see float in some kind of source code, just know that, you know what, this is a decimal number. Now let's actually remove all of this code. Let's actually continue. So let's create a double called j, and it is equal to 0.3. Now imagine that I now have an integer here called result, and I take 0.9, I take h plus j. So this is my first quiz for you. Pause this video and think for yourself. If we do like this, and I want to print result, I want to print this variable here, what kind of result will we get? What kind of output will we get? Because as you can see, we're adding two doubles and we are storing them in an integer. So what kind of result will we get? Let's take a look. Well, we get 1. Why is it so? Well, you remember that the result of this will be 1.2. And because we are storing 1.2, we're trying to store 1.2 in an integer. C++ will just skip this 0.2. It will not care about it at all. and it will just print 1 because int only cares about whole numbers. So be careful when you are casting types, because what you see right here is that you are casting double to int. You're casting double to int, and therefore you lose part of the value. You lose part of this value right here. So instead what you need to be doing is do double like this. So if I, let's see, if I, where was it? Build and run here. If I instead write double here, I get 0.2 here as well. So guys, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you now know more about variables. I hope you know more about how variables work in C++. But I also hope that you are kind of familiar with this, because this is nothing completely new. We're just learning new ways to express our knowledge, which we already learned in JavaScript, because this is something we already knew from JavaScript. And this is nothing to be afraid about or, you know, worry about. The only thing we're learning is new ways of expressing the same knowledge and the same things that we already did before when we used JavaScript. So guys, I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you in the next video.